we are going to be speaking with former naval officer Andrew MacGillivray to talk about concerns about the Royal Canadian Navy, who are planning to do away with its official marching song over concerns of its lyrics, which refer to colonialism and lack examples of diversity. We've heard it all before. Now, this song, the British song Heart of Oak, dates back to 1759, more than a century before Canada's Confederation. But of course, in our efforts to erase Canadian history, they will be doing away with it. Andrew, thank you so much for being here today. I just want to start off the hop by asking you now, this marching song, how often was this something that you actually used, perform, sang, listened to while you were in the Royal Canadian Navy?
So I served for 12 years out at sea at BS Esquimalt on the West Coast. It's not something that I remember being used too often. It's usually during parades and that sort of thing. But it's not like it's not a huge deal within the Royal Canadian Navy. You know, we focus on other things than being at sea, but it is used, and it's something. It's part of the tradition of the RCN that goes back, over 100 years.
Is it a song that when you heard during these parades that you mentioned, is it something that would sort of strike feelings of patriotism within you, feelings of pride, or would you say that you were just kind of indifferent about it?
So I was personally indifferent. There are people out there and sailors that where it would have struck pride and that sort of thing. But I think it contributes to the larger picture of the complete erasure of the tradition within the Navy, going back our ties to the Brits and what our small country has accomplished over the past 100 years with the RCN, and it's just continued to erase that history. So there will be people who don't care. There will be people that are upset about the removal of the song.
So the Royal Canadian Navy says that they are going to look at replacing the song because it includes references to colonialism and slavery rather, and language that is not representative of all those who serve in today's Navy. What's your response to this?
So they've been going through this, modernization of the Navy, from the changing of the ranks and the all the verbiage, the PER system, which is the personnel evaluation report, and just land acknowledgments, right? So when I was doing the ceremonies with the enrollment ceremonies, because I was in recruiting my past couple of years, you had to do these land acknowledgments, and you couldn't use gendered language, and there was a lot of restrictions. So that's like demoralizing. Where they're focusing their efforts on just a bunch of nonsense when there's so many more problems out there within the RCN that they could be focusing on. So it's, like me, like I said, me personally, it's not, too big of a deal, but they have been attacking tradition of the RCN as well as the Canadian Armed Forces as a whole. And that's what's leading to the crisis in recruiting and retention. And I believe it's a factor in, why we're over 20,000 regular force troops short of our full fighting strength.
So when you talk about it, just speaks to the fact that they have been attacking our history and our tradition and, the lack of recruits that's producing. What are some other examples? You seem to think that this has been a recurring issue within the Royal Canadian Navy. What are some other ways that you feel that the Navy and the Canadian military has been attacked, and that's led to this struggle to find recruitment?
So there's a couple things. The first thing is the introduction of DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the adoption of using critical theory and critical race theory to form military doctrine and policy. They've come out and admitted that they've done that. So when I was in, they brought in they had to do this, DEI training session. They brought in a lady from D&D. She attacked Christians, she attacked men, and she attacked white people. And basically, they called us all colonizers. And it was just demoralizing. And so, the first article I did about this with the Epoch Times back in March of 2022, this is what I called, the managed decline. They're doing this on purpose. They're purging patriotic men and women from the Canadian Armed Forces, and they're burning it down So it's something called entryism. So they're purging everyone. They've then changed the uh, promotion system and your annual reporting system from the PER system to the PAR system. And this PAR system, one of the promotional criteria is, how inclusive you are. So if you drink the Liberal Party Kool-Aid, we're going to promote you. And if you don't, you won't get get a promotion. So this is all being done on purpose. They want to burn down the Canadian Armed Forces, and then build it back as this inclusive, woke, completely ineffective fighting force. But that's not what their priority is. It's not defending the country. It's building this into a complete, woke laughing stock of the country.
It's interesting you say they are tearing down people who are Christians, people who are white, individuals who are men. I would assume that those categories make up most of the Canadian Navy and the Canadian Army. It's been a number of years since you were in it, but you obviously still have close relationships with those involved. What's the morale like right now?
So morale has never been lower. And there's a reason, there's with my organization, we get sent a ton of tips, pictures, documents that we sort of share to sort of expose what's happening. There's a reason that attrition is at 9.2%. That's the last number we had from a couple months ago. And, they're trying to blame everything else except their DEI and woke policies. So it's bad right now with 9.2%. However, the GWAT, or Global War on Terror veterans, they're going to be approaching their 25-year pensions within the next couple of years. I know guys who are senior who are just counting down the days for them to pop smoke and retire. So it's going to get even worse over the next 3 to 5 years unless there's drastic changes that are made, and boost morale and get them new equipment, get them the proper training, and build that esprit de corps and that cohesion within your fighting units. That is what you have to do.
Wow. I suspect that with the Liberal government's efforts to so strongly attack what they believe is called toxic masculinity, just strong men, it's impacting the Canadian Navy, the military, but I also suspect that it's impacting Canadian border service agents. And we know that there is a need for more hiring there. We were just talking about this on the show today. Given Trump's 25% tariffs that he's going to be imposing, one of the things the Liberal government could do is they could strengthen our border, our shared border with the United States of America, put more border agents there. But I can't help but wonder, if they're attacking the strong men that we need to fill these roles, are they even going to be able to fill those jobs? Should they, decide to spend more and to actually seek to recruit individuals?
Yeah. So it's in terms of recruiting, your highest per capita for Canadian Armed Forces recruiting is from rural areas. Okay, the reason being is one, you can kids, young men and women with grade 10 education can join to become infanteers and cooks. Two, you can there's good, like, less job opportunity in these rural areas. Okay, and three, there's jobs within the Canadian Armed Forces that attract people who live in rural areas, such as shooting guns, driving ATVs, being out of the bush or being out in the bush. So what they've done is, with this sort of woke DEI stuff, they've completely alienated their natural base of recruiting, right? Because young men and women from rural areas, generally conservative, do not want to join with sort of woke nonsense. And so so it's not the most, but when I was in recruiting, the highest per capita, so the best bang for the buck that the Canadian Armed Forces got was from rural areas, which are generally conservative. So they completely alienated them. Now, there's a great podcaster out there called Andy Stump, ex-Navy SEAL, and he was asked, he was at a leadership conference, and he was asked about diversity in the SEALs and if that was impacting operations. And his quote, which I remember verbatim, is the best I've ever heard. He said, "Well, are we aiming for diversity, or are we aiming to achieve a standard that is dictated by what we encounter on the battlefield? And the battlefield doesn't give a crap about diversity." And that's exactly what it is. And unfortunately, the senior officers, like General Rick Hillier, was back at the Chief of Defense Staff back in the 90s. he made a great comment. He said, we're not just some other, some public service department. We are the Canadian Armed Forces, and we are in the business of killing people. And they've got so far away from that. They've put in a very woke Jenny Kerrigan, who drinks the Liberal Party Kool-Aid. And so there has to be wholesale changes to the culture of the Canadian Armed Forces. And they have to bring back some toxic masculinity, because the primary role of the infantry is to close with and destroy the enemy.
Bring back toxic masculinity. Maybe that can be your next t-shirt. I just thought that this would be a fun little anecdote for the audience. But before we got started, we were chatting, and it turns out that those maple mega hats that you guys have been seeing everywhere, I've been seeing everywhere, Andrew is actually the person who's been supplying them online. He says that his products have never been in higher demand. What other types of products do you sell online, and where can my audience find your merch?
So you can check it out at maplemega.shop, so .shop, and we're putting up new lines every week, and we got all sorts of funny hats and things that are out there that are mocking the liberals. Now, just to caveat that, I'm just sort of helping out. I'm not necessarily the owner. There's a young man named AJ, who's running it, and I'm just I purchased some of the merch and shared it around, and it's pretty funny, and it's really taking off.
That's great. Well, I spend way too much of my hard-earned, valueless Canadian dollar on political merch, so I will definitely be checking out your store. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to following your work and some of the more stories that you have on the corruption going on within the woke Canadian military and navy.
Thank you for having me.